Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 455. Meeple Nation, December 2022 news.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Go to their website, check out their product. They have some very cool stuff. They have game toppers that will go on your table. They have mats that can go on your table that you currently have if you don't have a topper. All of their products are high quality and amazing. There's going to be new stuff coming out next year. So look forward to Kickstarter 4.0. Find some more amazing products. I'm excited for additional Watson Extra Long mats. Kind of limited on my selection of those mats. I'm looking forward to that. So look for that. And in the meantime, go to GameToppersLLC.com.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday. Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday.
I'm Douglas Stewart.
I'm Nathan Howard.
And I am Dave Holiday.
Jump over to our website at meeplenation.com. We have links to all of our episodes. If you're interested in going back and trying to find an episode about a particular mechanic or two-player games, there are lots of episodes that you can reference. All of our future episodes will also be posted on our website. We have blogs that each of us write, plus we have some guest bloggers that also write for us. We have bios if interested in learning a little bit more about us as hosts of Meeple Nation and our bloggers. We have photos of the different games we play, of some of the cons that we've been to and hosted events at. If you have any questions, we would love to hear from you, or comments. Send us an email at meeplenation@gmail.com. And finally, if you like what we do, and we definitely love what we do, jump over to our website and hit that Patreon link. We love our supporters. We thank you so much for supporting the podcast. We definitely want to improve things and make things more enjoyable for you, our listeners. If you would like to support the podcast, please jump over to Patreon and hit the link there and send any support our way that you feel like you can. Definitely appreciate it.
This week we are talking about December news. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I kind of feel like the theme for me this last month has been more. More of the same, more of kind of all the goodness we've already been diving into and have talked about a little bit. So I don't know that I have a lot of new highlights, but I definitely would love to talk about the things we've been doing more of this last month. Starting us off with Gloomhaven, because it's been a little while since we've jumped into that. And we always joke when we talk about the game toppers, we talk about the dining leaves that go over the top. And we always joke about how we're going to put those leaves over Gloomhaven and leave it set up all the time. We've actually been doing that. It's been about a month now. It's been awesome. Gloomhaven's a great game. After my group had played 60 or 70 games of it, I think we just got a little burned out and we never finished, and it's felt really good to jump back in, kind of rekindle the love for Gloomhaven, especially with Frosthaven just around the corner.
Been really excited to get Gloomhaven back to the table, and not just because it was on my 10 for 10. I think you're spot on. Gloomhaven is a great game. I'm looking forward to continuing playing that and jumping into Frosthaven when we're done with this. Very much enjoyed my experience with it.
Around 2 years ago, we did an episode where we each talked about our top 5 games. This is before Doug was with us, while we still knew who Logan was. Gloomhaven, I think, was in the top 5 of each of us. If it wasn't in the top 5, it was top 5 adjacent. Yes, right there with you. It's been awesome to revisit Gloomhaven.
I, in fact, finally got to retire my character that I've been playing for forever. Starting a new character, and it's actually freshened up the game a little bit for me. So that's been nice.
I've also really enjoyed jumping back into Descent. We've had a couple of nights where we've had a couple of game nights recently where the numbers have been a little thinner, and it's allowed Andy, Dave, and myself to jump back into a campaign that we had started a while back. A ton of fun. Descent 2nd Edition is one of those games that is just kind of pure dungeon crawl goodness, right? It just tickles that itch every time you get it to the table. It's the comfort food of dungeon crawls. I love it when we have the opportunity to get that one out.
I'll never pass up a chance to pull out Descent 2nd Edition. It is my favorite game. The fact that we were able to continue the mission that we started, when we started it with it being only 3 players playing that, I thought there's no way we're going to come back to this. Because I have all of the slots filled up on my app to play the game, and there are some that I think we've played once. inevitably they'll get deleted when another game gets started. So it makes me really excited that we were actually able to not only to get this back to the table once, but we've actually been able to do it twice within the last month or so.
Continuing on with more goodness, for me, more Arkham Horror with my good friends Matt and Monica. Back when we were doing our Halloween episodes, it got brought up that Arkham Horror is my number one game of all time. It remains true today, and I think it's going to be my number one game for a very long time. To be clear, we are talking about the LCG, not the board game.
Not the horrible one.
Not the horrible one. But it has been really fun for me to play with Matt and Monica. At this point, Arkham Horror is just such a big, sprawling game. 7, 8, maybe even 9 campaigns at this point. Player card library is huge. There's a lot going on mechanically with new keywords and card types and everything that have been introduced. And it has been so fun to play with people who know those cards inside and out. Matt in particular, he's like a savant when it comes to the Arkham Horror card library. And it's just so fun to play that game on a little bit higher level. And we've been making our way through the Dream Eaters campaign. For people who may be unfamiliar, typically when you play a campaign of Arkham Horror, everyone's going to create an investigator. You build a deck. And then as you go through the campaign, that deck gets upgraded. With the Dream Eaters campaign, you actually create 2 investigators. So you create 2 decks. One team of investigators sort of dives down into the dream world, where they're trying to figure out what dark and evil lurks there. And then the other team sort of acting as their protectors almost as they dream and trying to deal with the real life manifestations of that dream world creeping into our reality. You actually split back and forth between the 2 investigators, between the 2 teams. I have really been blown away mechanically at what the game is having us do. It's been really fun to switch back and forth between those investigators, really fun to level them up, and to have that experience with other people at the table. More Arkham Horror, and we've still got more to come. Super, super excited to be playing that.
Arkham Horror is a game that I regret culling. I just wasn't going to play it. That was just a game I never got to the table, and I had found myself playing most of those scenarios solo, which were enjoyable still. I think product is amazing. The story's so well fleshed out and worthwhile. I understand completely why it's your number one game. As my library keeps getting bigger, I need to go back and maybe adjust some of those games that I'm keeping as I'm quickly running out of shelf room. Arkham Horror was a great game, but if you're never going to play that great game, maybe you make room for something else. I miss playing Arkham Horror. I thought it was great.
I can kind of see where you're coming from. I have been playing that one solo quite a bit, but I will tell you, it is just so much better with other people at the table.
Absolutely. And I think that was my frustration, is because I played with other people before, and I totally agreed that the game is far more enjoyable multiplayer than it is solo. It isn't the same.
I'm curious, Nathan, because another game that I've gotten more of played this last month is Marvel Champions, the LCG. Been talking about that a little bit lately. Brigham and I have been playing that and enjoying some of the new characters. In some of our past conversations, it seems like that one's kind of going away for you as well. So maybe it's this LCG model.
I think what it is, when I'm the only person invested in my game, I'm the one that has all the cards in the card library, and Marvel Champions is growing at an excessive rate as well. I become the one that, here, let me make a deck for you. The people that are playing, they're not invested. If you're playing with somebody who is invested, who owns their own stuff, that becomes a lot different than me giving somebody a Nathan constructed deck. This is going to work great for you. Same thing with the customizable card games I've played in the past, like Star Wars, Star Trek from Decipher, or even Marvel Overpower. Games that actually still have most of. I finally got rid of my Overpower stuff. Still have a bunch of Star Wars and Star Trek stuff. I really have a hard time getting rid of. It's not something that you can cull. No one's going to pick it up and say, oh, I really want that stuff. It's usually something that is either going to the trash, which is hard to do because I invested so much time and money into it, as opposed to keeping it and thinking, oh, this is great. I'm going to play this 2-player card game sometime in the future, which is false. There's no way that game is ever going to see the table again. But yet I have such a hard time getting rid of that game. Arkham Horror, the living card game, I wasn't as deeply invested in that as both Star Trek and Star Wars. Still, it was a great game. Both those other games were great games. They weren't going to see the table. Short story long, if you have somebody who's invested, who is willing to put forth the time to construct their own decks, bring that deck to the table, makes a huge difference.
I do agree with that. These are 2 games, though. Open invite. Anytime you guys want to sit down and do some deck creation and learn how to play them, I'm always willing to teach and try to get people into those because I am heavily invested and I love both of them and have had a great time playing both of those games recently. In fact, Marvel Champions LCG just beat the Rise of Red Skull campaign on Expert Level 2, which isn't quite the hardest difficulty that game has to offer, but it's pretty hard and it was very difficult. Created an Ironheart deck and a Wolverine deck. Brigham and I played through that and finally beat it, and that was super satisfying.
I would totally love to jump in on it. I mean, it sounds like my favorite game.
Because it's new.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same point, Dave, you have to take that time because you especially...
Yeah, you gave me the cards and I have to build a deck. Yeah, it's going to take me some.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a good deck.
In 2 years, you can play it with Dave.
2? I don't know. That's pretty optimistic.
As long as they don't come out with anything new.
Which is every month.
I'm excited. Finally re-downloaded BG Stats and have started keeping track again.
I'm excited for you, too. Are you backing it up this time?
I don't know.
You should probably sit down with one
there.
of us. Set that up so that when you change phones again, you don't lose that information.
I think the backup service for that app is something like 99 cents a year.
Excited that you're keeping track of your games too. Having that app as a resource to be able to look back. We just had an experience playing Gloomhaven, talking about a game that we played on BGA with Corey. Poor Corey felt like he was playing a completely different game. I couldn't remember exactly what game we were playing. I thought it was Great Western Trail, but it turned out that it was Ticket to Ride. I won the game with 169 points. Dave, you were second place with 103, and then poor Corey had 25 points. He was a little frustrated. Doug, you were talking at that same time about some of your scores that maybe you were embarrassed to say you were a gamer. And Corey made some comment. I can't remember quite what it was, but he was a little frustrated. His score just was not what he was hoping it would be, for sure.
Yeah, it was Great Western Trail. That is one of those games I understand mechanically how to play it, but apparently I don't understand how to score points playing it. Yeah, it was a little embarrassing. It's good to have those records to go back and answer questions and just be able to reflect a little bit on what you've played and where you spent your game time.
For us on the podcast, it's an essential resource, for me anyways, to be able to say, what have I played the last 30 days? The older I get, the harder it is for me to remember what I had for breakfast, let alone what I've played over the last 30 days.
I use it a lot when I'm thinking back on conventions. Those seem to happen so quickly, are such a whirlwind thing when they happen. And it's really nice to be able to go back and reflect on some of the games you played, the people you played them with, to sort of relive some of those memories. That's great, Dave. I'm glad you got BG Stats reinstalled.
We're talking about looking back and reflecting. As you were saying, Doug, everything I've played this month, and I've played a lot of games this month. I'm well over 125 games. I've played 100 plus games with my wife this month. I'm loving. We consistently have 13 games that we're playing all the time on BGA, which I just can't believe that she has become such a game addict. She's also bringing up the point that, hey, we need to add something new. These games are getting a little stale. Incorporate something new. I'm excited about that, trying to find new games that we can play on a consistent cycle. The only new game that I played during the month of December was Kickstarter that we just got, and that was G.I. Joe Mission Control. Andy, your daughter Amara, myself, and our friend James played that. It was not really what I was hoping it was going to be. I still enjoyed the game. It's a cooperative game. It worked well as a cooperative game. All the Joes are on the same team, so that makes sense. It was a little bit hollow for me, but I still enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to playing it again. There's some additional content that came with the Kickstarter, some expansions that provide more variety, have that replayability, and I'm looking forward to including some of that, and hoping that that will buoy up my appreciation for that game. Growing up, G.I. Joe was huge for me. It's always a little bit disappointing when it just doesn't give me that nostalgia that I'm looking for. Still a good game. Looking forward to playing it again. What did you think of that, Andy?
I liked it. I'm kind of with you. I think it was better than I thought it was when we first set it up. Maybe I was being a little pessimistic on how fun it was going to be. I've talked about this before, that it worries me so much when there's anything like that, whether it's G.I. Joe or Transformers or anything that's themed based on movies, or that it's going to be a skin on a crappy game, they're hoping with that skin that they can sell it.
Well, it's all nostalgia.
Absolutely.
They're hoping to cash a paycheck based on people's nostalgia
Yep.
for that intellectual property.
And that really worries me. I have been burned before.
For sure.
So I was pleasantly surprised when we played it, to be honest. I think we were on opposite ends of the spectrum. You had high hopes and I didn't have very high hopes at all. Sounds like we kind of met in the middle. I had fun and it was more fun than I thought. I mean, I would definitely play it again. I can see what you mean by it not hitting all the nostalgic buttons. I'm really hoping that once we get into the G.I. Joe RPG, that may be the case, because we can kind of create that how we want once we start playing that.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too, because I've steeped myself quite heavily into background for this RPG. I don't want it to fizzle and you guys say, this is the dumbest thing we've ever done.
We have the books for our characters. I think once we get going, start learning the game, because it's not a system that any of us have played before. There's that part of it that we have to learn how to play. But I think once we get past that, I think it's going to be a blast.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it. G.I. Joe, I'm just young enough that I caught kind of the tail end of the G.I. Joe golden age. The nostalgia doesn't burn as hot for me, but I'm still excited to play some of these games. And I'm especially excited for the RPG. People are going to get tired of hearing us talk about it. We need to jump in there and play it. I'm really looking forward to that.
Grew up on the 80s cartoon, but a lot of my nostalgia comes from the early Marvel comics. I think there were greater stories that were there, greater character development, less annoying voices. So
I would hope so.
That is definitely true.
I guess all the voices were in my head.
So we recently had a game night over at Doug's house, met some new people, got to chat a little bit more with Brad, Lydia's cousin. Really enjoyed chatting with him, and also with Eric and McKenna. I just had a really good time at that game night.
We had some really fun people there. It's kind of amazing with Eric and McKenna. They've been in our neighborhood for 4 or 5 years, and we've known them and associate with them and talk to them from time to time, but board games have never come up. Finally, Lydia was talking to McKenna. The topic of board games came up. You never know when you have people who say they're into board games over to play, because you might just be getting people who've played Catan and Ticket to Ride and think they're super gamers. And hey, they can call themselves gamers. There's nothing wrong with those games. It's awesome. It's always very pleasantly surprising when you find people who are like real gamers. And Eric and McKenna are real gamers. They really knew their stuff. Fun to get to know them and talk to them and play games with them.
While we were there, I got to play Flamecraft with you, Doug, and Porter and my daughter, Amara. I know you guys talked about the artwork a lot. The artwork was not as cool to me as it was to Porter. Really seemed to like it, but I really liked the game. The mechanics were cool. It was really simple, but I liked the resource management aspect of it, worker placement aspect of it. It was great.
Well, it was simple, but it lets you set up really fun combos.
Yeah.
Everything takes place out in this sort of village market square area. It's all public knowledge, and you're not setting something up for yourself that only you can do. Everybody kind of has access to all the craft stalls and has access to all the dragons. It's what you're going to do to maximize efficiency and to create the best combo that you can on your turn. Everything's going to shuffle around. You're going to score some points, and you may set up something for somebody else. As you do your thing, you play dragons out, you build up the village, and then you set up somebody else to do something, and it kind of escalates. As the village fills more full of those booths and the dragons, the options just get better and better and better.
Yeah, I really liked how they did the resource generation in it. It builds like you say, but it's very unique. Not having played anything that really kind of had that mechanism. The more cards you play in each of those stands, now that produces more resources. Or when you enchant that stand, those are the basic things you're going to be doing. Enchanting or visiting the stand to produce resources. Once again, very simple. You're basically choosing between two actions, but the different abilities and combinations that can produce just with those two actions in the game was really impressive to me. Honestly, I thought I was going to win that game until Porter pulled a Dave. So the only thing that's not secret information are the dragons in your hand, and you can have regular dragons that you play in the stalls, plus you have the special dragons that are going to potentially score you points. Like there's two different kinds. They're held until the end of the game, and then they can score you bonus points. And Porter came back with a vengeance, ended up destroying us.
It's those fancy dragons, and there's two different kinds. Some of them that can be played during the game, and then others that are end-game scoring cards that you see in a lot of other board games. He had a whole bunch of them in his hand, and he'd just been collecting them and hoarding them and holding on to them. Sure enough, that last round, he scored something like 30, 35 points. It was ridiculous. He was way far behind, and then he just shot way ahead. It was crazy, but good for him. That was awesome.
Also able to play Trails of Tucana with the wives that night. That was a riot. The fact that my wife was willing and able to sit down and play Trails of Tucana was awesome. Usually getting her to play games is like pulling teeth. And I think she had fun. The nice thing is it's a quick game, and she tends to gravitate towards those quicker games. Roll and rights and flip and rights, those seem to be more of her cup of tea.
I love Trails of Tucana.
Was that your first time playing that, Andy?
No, I'd played it a couple of times prior to that. Every time we've played it, I come away just thinking it's great, having a lot of fun.
We have had just a ridiculous amount of success teaching that to new players. That's become one of our go-tos for like a gateway or sort of introduction to gaming game. Take that with us everywhere we go. Teach it as often as we can. We've had nothing but success with that. It's a really good game.
I think that was one of the first flip and rights I've ever played. I remember when they first started coming out with roll and rights and flip and rights, and I was kind of turned off by them. But I've come to where I really enjoy roll and rights and flip and rights a lot. If someone says, hey, this is a roll and write, I'm like, I'm down. Let's try it.
Because there's a lot of complexity in most all of those.
Yeah.
And such simple instructions, such simple gameplay. In most of them, the strategy is heavier than you would expect.
For sure. Especially for a game that's potentially only 20 minutes to a half an hour in length, which most of those are about that long. It's really cool to be able to sit down and have at least a little bit of depth with something like that that's simple. I've gotten to where I really enjoy them.
Speaking of complexity and roll and rights, a game that we were able to play that is probably on all of our highlights fits that bill.
Twilight Inscription.
The most recent play of this game was my first. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a game that I love very much. It's a game that is complex, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So much that I'm going to enjoy exploring in that game.
Yeah, you guys had busted this out for game night the other day, and I was a little late because we had some other things going. I hadn't played it since BGG Con. When I got there and saw that it was out on the table, and Andy was like, hey, jump in, just barely started. I got super excited. I was just like, yes, I love this game. That has become one of my favorite roll and write games. It was one that when they first announced it, I did not think I was going to enjoy it at all. In fact, I wasn't even going to try it. I had no interest.
Twilight Imperium was once my favorite game. Back when I didn't mind sitting at the table for 6 to 8 hours playing the exact same game. I haven't played Twilight Imperium for a really long time, probably because my last experience, I think, was 12 hours. I may or may not have lost my taste for it a little bit. That being said, when I heard that they were going to do a roll and write, like an epic roll and write for the Twilight Imperium universe, I was extremely excited. My love for roll and writes had already manifested at that point, so I'm thinking a heavy roll and write game, count me in. That sounds awesome. And you know what? It did not disappoint. I'm with you, Doug and Dave. I love it. It's my favorite roll and write as well. It's amazing. It's such a great game.
I was concerned about it. I thought it was going to be way too complex of a roll and write. Goes back to that same issue we had with G.I. Joe Mission Control, where I went in thinking this game is just going to be way too much going on, too hard to follow, and it wasn't. It is a great game, and I look forward to every time we can play it. And I was a little bummed out you guys played without me, but I guess that's what I get for staying home.
That's becoming a common thread.
The last highlight I wanted to mention, game we've talked about many times, Feast for Odin. It's a game that I love. I say this every time. I love this game, but it's a game I'm not sure I will ever be good at. The reason I'm excited about it is I've got a couple more plays in, and I feel like maybe I'm getting better. I still can't tell for sure, so I'm not fully committing to saying that I'm getting better, but I am still loving it.
This is one I still would really like to get a chance to play. I
too.
think it's one that I would have to play in person first before you can jump on to BGA online implementation. There's so much that's kind of lost in translation there.
I totally agree. So here's what we're going to do. Feast for Odin night at my house. I'll send out a date one of these nights. We'll get that to the table. You guys absolutely need to play that. It's one of the classics. It's a great game. One of Uwe Rosenberg's very best, in my opinion.
It is just such a big game. It looks a little daunting, to be honest, looking at it, not having learned the rules or how to play. You look at the board and you're like, oh my gosh. Kind of like how you felt with Twilight Inscription, Nathan. That's how I feel when I look at this board. I'm like, my word, there is so much going on with this. And I can't remember how many actions that are available.
63.
Something like 63 actions, which is insane for a game.
And it can be a little bit daunting. With some of these more complex games, you have to weigh out the mental load you're willing to take on versus what you get out of that experience. Yes, this has a little bit higher of a mental load, but what you get out of it is so worth taking on that cognitive load and learning how to play the game and learning the rules and learning those spaces and actions. The payoff is huge. We'll play this one soon.
Let's talk about some new games that are coming up. One of the first ones I want to mention is a game that I have enjoyed in its fantasy theme, and that is One Deck Galaxy, as opposed to One Deck Dungeon. 1 to 2 player game. In One Deck Dungeon, you're delving into the dungeon. You're a hero. You're going to roll dice, and you're going to have cards and abilities that are going to allow you to manipulate those dice. So this is a game that you can play, Andy. The new one has that sci-fi theme that I prefer over the fantasy theme. So I'm looking forward to this. This is a co-op game just like One Deck Dungeon, except for instead of going through the dungeon, visiting planets, part of your civilization that you've already scouted, and you're trying to colonize those, study those, and as you do that, you're going to gain those abilities to manipulate your dice that you're rolling and try to overcome the trials that you face. If this is as enjoyable as One Deck Dungeon, I'm very much looking forward to this One Deck Galaxy.
So I wanted to just make really quick mention of a couple of new releases, stuff that's out now. People can go and find it. The Wolverine and Storm heroes are out for Marvel Champions, the LCG. This is kind of a big deal. I think there's a lot of players who really like the Marvel Champions card game who've been waiting for a long time for the X-Men heroes to finally come along. And they kind of debuted the X-Men with an expansion pack. It was the Mutant Genesis expansion pack. Featured Colossus and Shadowcat. Those are very well-loved X-Men, but I think that the two heavy hitters, the ones that people were really, really jonesing for, were Wolverine and Storm. So they had Colossus and Shadowcat, then they released Cyclops and Phoenix, and now we finally have Wolverine and Storm. We're starting to flush out the X-Men in that game. Those are just out now, and they are really, really fun. I was talking about that earlier. I had created a Wolverine deck. Wolverine is awesome. The way he actually can use his health as a resource because he can regenerate it so quickly. Really flips a lot of the gameplay on its head, so that's been a fun hero for me to play. Storm's also, she has some cool new mechanisms. Those are out. You can get your hands on those. Also, Scarlet Keys for Arkham Horror. That's the new campaign for the Arkham Horror living card game, and that just hit the shelves as well. As we've talked about those, if those have sounded interesting to you, there's some brand new products out, and they're both fantastic.
Plus, we got Taverns of Tiefenthal, the new expansion that's out as well. And I'm crazy about that game. That is one of my favorite games. That was actually one of my highlights, playing that with you and Dave. There was a certain level of frustration coming from Doug, and it was almost like Thanksgiving dinner for me, to be honest, Doug.
I'm sure that it was. I always enjoy playing Taverns, but this last game, I don't know. This is the luck of how the cards came out, the order in which they came out. I mistimed all of my redraws or whatever. You know, there's a mechanism where you can dump everything you've pulled out and you have to kind of take a mulligan. I mistimed all of those. It was a really frustrating game, but honestly, it's still fun to play.
The best highlight was Dave's last turn. When he had such a good layout in front of him, I'm thinking, my gosh, that's such a great turn. Everything that he has in his tavern, and he mulliganed. And he used his counter guest and got...
He was he had great cards.
My second, so I did the mulligan. I had some good stuff out there, some decent. I mean, it was nowhere near as good as what I had before.
It wasn't.
So I took another mulligan.
It was worse.
And I just started the game. Turn one.
Yeah, that was
over again.
That was, I think, was the best part of that game, was just watching. I'm like, what are you doing? Why did you do that? It got worse. I'm going to do it again. And it got worse. I'm like, well, that's quite the end of the game for Taverns, David. But if I recall, you and Doug were really close. So
I think that's true.
It was like 75 to 76.
I mean, we could load up BG stats and find out. But here's the thing. You had to try something because Andy was so far ahead. You really needed to kind of take the risk to
that's why I did it. I was not going to beat him with the initial setup that last round.
Yeah, that's probably true. I'm excited for the expansion for that. Ever since I've been playing that game and got the game, and I've played the heck out of it. I've been very much looking forward for an expansion to hit the shelf. That's definitely going to be part of my game library.
That was one of the first games that I put on my 10 for 10 of a game that I didn't own.
Really?
Because I knew you had it. I was very intrigued to play it, and I enjoyed the game as well. Put that on my 10 for 10, and I didn't even own the game. And I still don't. And that's okay.
Yes, it is. You don't have to own every
job,
game.
Nathan.
Yeah.
Proud of you.
At our last game night over at Doug's house that I was talking about earlier, right toward the end, I walked in as Lydia and Sabrina were talking, and I could tell they were in a little bit of a complain mode about games and the volume of games, and it's an addiction.
So glad I wasn't there.
I'm so glad Cheryl wasn't there talking with them.
Yes.
But yeah, they were talking about this addiction. And so I asked what they were talking about, and they were like, buying games. Adrian is so lucky. Of course, started thinking of all the reasons that she was unlucky in things that unrelated or related both. I just pointed out, I was like, years ago, there was a game that I was going to buy, and I mentioned it to Andy, I think, and Dennis. One of them, I think, had just bought it, and the other one was like, yeah, I'm going to buy that too. And I was like, well, I guess I don't need to buy it. Why would I spend $60 or $70 on this game when two people that I play with games with regularly own the game?
Which we all need to do better at.
And what's the point, Dave? What are you getting at?
As long as I have more games than Andy, that's all that matters.
Now, one of my goals this year, and we've talked about this in the past a little bit, was to reduce and simplify the game collection, kind of whittle it down to the stuff that I really like and really want to play, to be a little bit more thoughtful about the stuff that comes into the library. And it's been kind of a rough year that way because I still have some acquisition disorder that I'm fighting when it comes to board games, but it's gotten better and I'm going to keep working on it. There is something to be said about having too many games. You were talking about it earlier with Arkham Horror and Marvel Champions, and they could be the best games out there, but if they're not going to see playtime at the table, there's maybe not as much a point in keeping them on the shelf. Those are hard decisions to make, but they are decisions we all kind of have to make as gamers as we work on our collections and cull and share our hobby with others.
Well, it's easier for you when you just transfer them to me. So it's not like really losing them. You still get to come by and visit them and talk to them and console them, see how they're doing, as opposed to giving them to somebody you don't know.
That's true. Nathan has bought a lot of the games that I have put up for sale. In fact, I'm staring at a stack of them right now.
Several new games that I was thinking looked pretty cool. There's one called Brides and Bribes. First, I was just intrigued because daughter recently got married. The whole bride thing is on my brain. It's kind of seared into my soul at this point. She's been enjoying playing a couple of games here and there, and so I'm always thinking of trying to find new games that she would enjoy to get her more involved. That's why I initially looked at it, but then as I was reading about it, that actually seems like a pretty cool game. It's got some of the mechanics that I really enjoy: deck, bag, and pool building, hand management, tile placement, a lot of the things I enjoy. It has stuff that I don't love as well, but overall seems pretty intriguing. It's a strategy game that's played over 6 rounds. Each player takes the role of a powerful family of Genoa. I guess I'm always kind of intrigued with the old school way that families used to marry off their children. Definitely a different way of dating than we see now, but I've always been kind of intrigued with that. This has some of that. Each have a powerful family that you represent, and you're trying to marry off some kids.
Speaking of kids, being a father and trying to get my kids more into games, I feel like I've successfully done that for the most part, in particular with my girls. But when they were younger, I really struggled because the games that were available to play were just not fun. You try to find some simple games out there that are fun, and back then it was difficult to do. Well, The Quacks of Quedlinburg is one of the favorite games at our house. Those of you that have younger children, there is now a junior version of this game that is a race. It is called Quacks and Company Quedlinburg Dash. Going to use similar mechanics. It has the bag building mechanic that Quacks is famous for. You're pulling out tokens, and you're going to place those tokens based on the number that is on the token itself. That will move your horse along the track. But each of the colors is going to have an effect. For example, a red token is going to give you from 1 to 3 rubies, or a blue token will allow you to upgrade something. It's definitely a more simplified version of the Quacks of Quedlinburg, but what a great gateway game to introduce your kids into gaming and to get them more excited about playing games. A simplified version of what is already a great game. Those of you who do have kids, I wish this would have been around when my kids were younger, because I think it would have been great. With my special needs boy, this actually may still be something I pick up. He likes to play Quacks of Quedlinburg. He cheats horribly at it. That's not surprising. He does that with every game. I think it'd be one that he would have even more fun with and understand a little bit better than the full version of the Quacks of Quedlinburg.
I really enjoy Camelot. It's a very simple racing betting game. Ready, set, bet. Fills that same niche. 2 to 9 player game, plays in about an hour. The game is played over 4 rounds. Each round consists of races followed by bet resolution. You're wagering on these races. trying to acquire money. And the more money you get, the higher chance you have of being invited to the VIP club, providing you extra ways of earning some more money. In the end of the 4 rounds, the player with the most money wins. Fairly simple mechanics, fairly simple instruction. I have my copy over here on the shelf I'm looking forward to busting out, and I like that it goes up to 9 players. I enjoy when a good game facilitates that many players, and hopefully once we get this to the table, I still feel that way because I'm pretty excited to play it.
I like the games that have that player count that don't dramatically increase the playtime.
Or bog it down.
Or bog it down. Like I'm thinking of Twilight Inscription, right? It plays up to 8. But yet everybody's taking their turns simultaneously. So it really doesn't slow the game down, adding extra players to it. But there are some games that you absolutely should never play the full player count because it is just a horrible experience. So hopefully that doesn't fall into that category.
All right, the last new game that I want to talk about is one that I have to mention because they finally have a game that looks like a good game called Nightfall.
They already do, Dave. Come on.
Nightfall, night as in the Knights of the Round Table, is a new game designed by Ryan Lockett and T. Alex Davis. It looks like a pretty cool game, and I'm super excited about it so that we can have a game somewhere where we're like, hey, let's play Nightfall, and I can be like, okay, let's do it.
And then we pull out the original.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this game too. It's on the shelf behind you.
Sounds like Dave could read rules.
Dave's got school.
So those are some of our game highlights. We've talked about some new games that are coming out. Really looking forward to New Year's because we usually play a lot of games during New Year's as well. Let us know if there's anything new that you're expecting to get or maybe something you get for Christmas this year that you're excited about. We would love to hear from you.
Until next time.
We'll see you chasing the sands of time as the year 2022 is just about gone.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter at Meeple Nation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braden Detergent for our music.
Check out their product. They have some very cool stuffs. They have some.
They do have some cool stuffs as well.
Some stuffies and some stuffs. I'm not sure where I was going with that.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday.
You didn't sound very excited.
Welcome to Meeple Nation, guys.
Thanks for noticing.
We're your hosts.
Thanks for noticing.
It's my birthday.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday.
I'm Douglas Stewart.
I'm Nathan Howard.
And I am Dave Holiday.
Yeah, that's not going to get annoying.
Now let's do it and not sound like total idiots.
That's a game that I sometimes that's a game I sometimes regret.
Regret? We the secret weapon.
He sometimes always regrets it.
Regrets it. He's regretting bringing it up now.
Same thing with the customizable card games that I've played in the Same thing with the custom.
You got this. You got this, brother.
Same thing with the customizable card games I've played. If this is remotely as enjoyable, if this is even, if this is enjoyable, if this isn't